and welcome to The Connected Singer with Michael Hill and me, Julie Thompson. We're both singers and vocal coaches who love researching and learning new ways to keep in tip-top shape, vocally and mentally.
We know that being a performer is a hugely rewarding but also demanding career for mind, body and soul. And we want to help you find the balance you need to keep going on your musical journey. Each week, we'll be speaking to performers, teachers and expert practitioners in a range of fields.
From psychology to sports science to Reiki, who will share their knowledge and experiences to provide you with a toolkit of ways to keep well, beat performance anxiety,
avoid burnout and get the most enjoyment out of the pursuit we all love, singing.
Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Connected Singer podcast. We've just had one of the most insightful, on a different level, interviews with our guest, Ella Mesma. She's from the UK, but is residing in Portugal. So that in itself is a very interesting story. Yeah, it was quite a beautiful interview, actually, I felt. We were taken on a journey into Ella's world, into her cultural background, her heritage, and an insight into the reasons why she makes the art that she makes. And it was really interesting to hear it from a dancer's perspective and how she explored her voice through other artists and other singers, but how she embodied that. I felt it was different from other singers because she's a dancer, so she uses movement a lot. There were lots of references to movement and energy through the body and how that can influence the voice.
Yeah, and I hope everyone really finds this as inspiring as we did. And I think it's important that as singers, we kind of explore what we can learn from a variety of disciplines. So different creative arts, but also just different people and different perspectives. It can be really enriching. And that's what I think Ella has given us, is just completely different perspectives on how to think about the voice and about singing, coming at it from outside of what can sometimes, I suppose, be a bubble, that we're in because we think about how the voice works and vocal technique and, all of these very, sometimes it can get, in a good way, but it can get quite sort of nerdy and detailed and
scientific.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, just to take a step back and see it through someone else's eyes is really it gives you a fresh take on things. And yeah, I hope that's what everyone gets from this. It's really, what a fascinating person.
Absolutely. She talks about expression an awful lot. And as you say, normally we tend to get a little bit technical sometimes, and which is obviously important to sustain sort of good vocal health. But she comes from a very different angle and talks about how she uses the voice to express herself, not just in an artistic way, but in a empowering way. Yeah, I think the listeners will get a lot out of that because that's very important for any artist, isn't it? It's a part of the journey as a singer or performer that needs to be explored in order to also to sustain a healthy mind and body connection and career.
And meeting someone that joyous in so many ways and inspiring and motivating, it kind of, what's been really nice, I think, with the interviews that we've been lucky to have with people is at least it's made me come away and think, what is singing really? Why do we do it? And but it's also made me think it's so important that we do.
Yeah.
Whatever the goal is.
Yeah.
It has so many benefits in life. And every time we have one of these conversations and we get all excited about it and come away thinking, oh yeah, it sort of reminds you that it's something that really has value and is worthwhile. Whether you are a shower singer or a big stage performer, just the most important thing is do it. Enjoy the unique voice that you have, and that's what I came away with from Ella, was just keep opening your gob and singing.
you remember to have the fun and remember why you're doing it, I think is really important. And I think what I also felt through Ella's interview was to remember that you can bring lots of creative disciplines together and not overthink it. That anything's possible. If you want to try it, do it. You know, everything's connected anyway. We're all human beings and we can all move. We can all talk and speak. And so why can't we all sing? You know, and we all have opinions. We all have backgrounds. We all have history. We all have had experiences. And why not use, if you want to, use art to express that? It was very inspiring for me to say, well, actually, there are other parts of my sort of creative expression that I'd like to explore. So I think hopefully that will inspire, as you say, those bedroom, shower, stage singers to maybe even branch out and find another part of their expression to explore.
The Connected Singer.
Just before we start, a little update about our new Facebook group. Yes, we also have one. Here, you'll be able to connect with us, with each other, discuss themes that we've covered in the podcast, plus you'll be able to find more information and resources from and about our featured guests.
We love hearing from different perspectives, different ideas that you all have. So get in touch. Let us know what's sparking your creative ideas, what's getting your creative juices flowing.
Absolutely. We will also be posting updates on our upcoming guests, so if you have any questions you would like to ask them, please reach out to us there and we will include your questions during the session and even give you a mention if you so wish. We are so keen to support all you singers out there, as we know as much fun as a singer's life is, it can be quite a challenging journey and sometimes a really lonely one. So if you're looking for some extra support or depth on singers' themes, pop over to our Facebook group and say hello. We'd love to meet you and connect you to the people or answers you are looking for.
Connected Singer.
So today we are so lucky to have an incredibly inspiring creator and beautiful human being with us who has not only extensive and varied performance experience, but is an impressive businesswoman, mentor and coach. A fully trained dancer and yogi, she has traveled the world as a performing artist, choreographed festivals, created her own dance productions, one being the most recent I Am All Woman lockdown project, and offered yoga retreats in exotic locations, one definitely for my own bucket list. On top of this, she's the published author of Journal to Joy and the director of the prestige award-winning company Business Yoga. But her amazing accomplishments don't stop there. She has been passionately expanding her Path for Series mentoring program that helps artists and professionals embody creativity and abundance through workshops and retreats. She is also a fellow podcaster, hosting the podcast Power Up. And in her spare time, whatever she has left, she enjoys poetry, nature, languages, personal development, and has a deep interest in social justice. So without further ado, we welcome the wonderful and sunny Ella Mesma.
Woo, woo, woo. Thank you. I love that introduction. Thanks so much, Julie.
Hi,
I'm
Ella.
very well, thank you.
How are you doing?
So I think we're going straight into the deep end, if we may, because I saw this brilliant quote on your website that I just have to read. It's really really resonated with me. Is that we are inspired to make work that undoes limiting beliefs and celebrates cultural and social identity to empower and inspire our audiences. So. It's a wonderful manifesto, really, for your work. So
Thank you.
What limiting beliefs have you managed to undo through your own creative process? And I guess, what have you seen happen in others through this type of exploration?
Sure. So it kind of came from my time as a dancer, as a touring artist, and just feeling like I was coming to the studio with a lot of stuff and observing that in others and realizing that it kind of felt like it wasn't a space where we could have that stuff, but we did need to tell the stories of our stuff and almost like put our souls on the dance floor. But then there wasn't this kind of holding space for the spillage that might result in, and that we had to kind of like be okay and get on with it and just be a great dancer. And I started to think that just doesn't feel right for me. It's like you're really going into the depths and like pulling out the most painful experiences, but then there's no kind of holding space for that. And also, I think there is this possibility that when we are working with our bodies in this way, we have this potential to understand ourselves on quite a deep level, and that this can be transformational, but that you have to put the right kind of recipe and ingredients, I suppose, to allow that to happen. And so yeah, that was where it came from. And the first piece that I made myself was called Evol, which was Love Backwards. Mm-hmm. And, it really was a kind of like almost like a therapeutic experience of releasing a lot of stuff for me. And I think from that place, I just started to explore more and more of, well, how do I also hold the space that can be an emotional experience? And I wanted to work with individuals rather than that kind of because many of the companies that I danced for before, it felt like it wasn't about you as an individual. It was kind of like, get your leg here and like execution kind of a stuff rather than like, who is that individual? And so that was where it kind of began to grow from, was I want to tell the stories of those humans. And when I go and see my artists, I want to see them telling their story, and that you're really invited into that story, and it's them with permission. It's not because the choreographer told them to spew everything up in that space.
Yeah. That's really fascinating, actually, because this is something that we're trying to bring out in Leeds Conservatoire,
mm-hmm. where one of my favourite places. Whoop, whoop.
It's awesome. We work with the singers to try and encourage that and to bring that out of them, because it does create not just a more authentic experience for the audience, but also for themselves, and gives them confidence that we quite often lack. We do get that. Of course, we get nerves, but it's having the confidence to actually believe in what it is we're trying to narrate, or our message, because that's usually why we get up on stage, isn't it? It's to express ourselves, right? That's where it all came from. And as singers, we've always had a love for, like you've had a love for dancing and movement. We've had a love for the voice and for singing, but we still get up there, to have a message, to have a narrative, to connect with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very difficult to do that if you're being told how to do that, because that then doesn't come from you, does it? It comes from
your head, don't you? Instead of it being in your heart, you kind of get very heady about everything.
That's right. Yeah. And it becomes very static, and then it's not as expressive. And then the audience sense that. So I get confused messages.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really fantastic.
And I've always said I like watching a human on stage. I'm not so bothered about, the leg, how high the leg goes and all that kind of thing. I like seeing that like heart space on a stage.
Yeah. And that's the same with the voice, actually. It's really interesting to see the parallels, to hear them, because we don't necessarily want to hear the highest note or the lowest note or the fastest run, or we want to hear what's coming from.
Oh, I'm so happy. I've just started training in singing as well. I'm loving my journey, and that's really great to hear. Yay!
Yes, there's so many parallels. Well, how about you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Sure. So I've been kind of working with 3 artists, actually. I've been working with Marv Radio, who's a beatboxer. And vocalist. I've been working with Christella Latras, who's based in Leeds and is an amazing singer, and a woman from London called Lauren Lucille. And it just was this kind of, it's something I've always wanted to do, but in lockdown, I think we had that time with ourselves of like, what do I want? And especially, in a quite small space where I couldn't necessarily really get down and dance. It was like, actually, I'm going to find these other ways of expression. And so I started it as an exchange with Marv, and then ended up doing these singing lessons with Lauren. And it's just been the most wonderful journey. And actually, I have to also big up another, Sabio Janiak. It's also been really great to work with Sabio. so I sing every week. I have my drills every morning, and it's crept its way into my newest piece, which is called Papillon. We're using voice, but we're also using kind of sounds and creating this soundscape with our own voices.
Oh, wow. So will there be lyrics, or will it just be sounds?
Both. There's been this whole kind of text. So it's fascinating, isn't it? I love the creative process, because this was a piece around imposter syndrome and kind of some of those things. But the text has ended up being about Oya, who is this wonderful goddess from Candomblé, or from the Yoruba Nigerian kind of traditions. And the text has ended up being about her. And for me, she kind of represents the throat chakra, and this warrior who is kind of fierce, and she just goes for it, and she's all about change and social kind of activism and so on. So it really felt like she was the right character. And we've ended up singing sections from her songs and so on. And it's just been a beautiful journey.
Wow. Could you, just because you're referencing so many amazing things, could you perhaps explain a little bit about where this comes from, where these influences come from, and your background, and how you come to create?
So my background, so I'm mixed heritage. We think Caribbean in English, but it's a long story.
Another podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But when I was, I think I discovered Brazilian dance really quite young. Like, I used to love, it was like my secret as a teenager, age 14, I would secretly listen to Brazilian music, knowing that I didn't quite belong in terms of that kind of, I grew up in Bristol, and I just knew it wasn't quite the done thing, but that was what I loved. And then I actually went to Brazil. I went quite a few times. I've been many times to Brazil, but the first kind of big trip that I did, I actually went on this samba exchange program with a circus randomly in Salvador. It's called Circo Piccolino. And there was like a priest who was part of the project, who created these shows inspired by the Orishas, who are gods and goddesses. And each one has like an element, has a color, has a personality type, and so on. And he told me that I was Oshun, which is really funny because Oshun is yellow. It's my absolute favorite color in the world. I just became fascinated. So it kind of started there. And, really has been kind of one of my life works, has been studying the Orishas, and they tend to feature in all my work, actually. And so Oya, also called Yansa, is this goddess of the hurricane. Her colors are in more kind of like a deep red or sometimes a purple color, and she represents the hurricanes, and she is, so often they'll be connected to animals. So her animals are the butterfly and the buffalo, which are quite like opposites, right?
Yeah.
But so Brazilian dance has become a really, really important part of my life, actually, and kind of more than just a dance practice. It's become quite a way of life for me. Yeah, so grateful to that priest way back then. And
it's amazing, isn't it? Just sort of one experience can completely sort of influence your whole journey, your creative journey. So it's, I think it's really. I think just if you're somebody also that is being an inspiration, or you're creating things, just to remember that you don't always have to have this feeling of doing huge things. You just one small thing that you've created can have a huge impact on other people's lives.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So how different has it been exploring your voice to your dance? So are there huge differences, or what are the similarities, or what have you learned?
Sure.
What can they learn from each other? Just expanding on that a little bit more.
So I think they're so connected. It feels like it's like two pieces of this kind of puzzle of life almost. But I think the thing that was really most interesting for me was this idea of this goddess voice. But I realized that I wasn't speaking from, I've definitely had kind of issues with imposter syndrome and not belonging belief my whole life. And I realized that I was kind of speaking almost like from this little girl place. And there was this, and this kind of came out of a lot of work with Sabio Janiak, that I suddenly just dropped down into like my woman voice. And I realized like this is me speaking from whole, whereas like, I don't even know if I can do it anymore, my old voice, but it was like I was speaking from a place of not really believing in who I was.
Yeah.
And it was just this fascinating moment of like the journey of singing and the journey of listening within helped me to connect that and be like all of these kind of pieces that I was learning in terms of dance and dancing from whole and not bringing all of that stuff, all of our, and Julie knows I work a lot with alchemy, with this kind of concept of our whole self and coming back home to ourselves, but that actually you can use it in physicality and you can use it in terms of sound, the sounds that we make as well.
Yeah, fascinating.
How have you managed, what is the process of finding, like you say, your goddess voice? Because I find it really, really fascinating, because the more I think that, I think I can speak for Julie as well, that we dig into the never-ending world of voice and creativity, the more the unquantifiable things become more appealing, because you can sort of read a research paper and you can look at evidence and say, okay, this is what I may or may not believe. But so much of the kind of magic is in these things that we can't really put our fingers on.
Yeah, and absolutely, I agree. I think it's the intuition, it's that getting back in touch with, and like alchemy, the kind of principles are as above, so below. So it's like, what is I call it our goddess state or our genius self, and what is our shadows or our ego. And for me, it's about bringing that to light, that these kind of hidden sides of ourselves. Like, there was so much shame when I was touring as a dancer and trying to present like I didn't have all of these kind of beliefs going on and all of this stuff, all of this imposter syndrome in the studio. And when I just voiced it, rather than hiding it and kind of did work around understanding what I was bringing to the space, then actually what I could do was refocus my attention on my genius self or my goddess state. And I think that's the magic, is doing that work and looking at those two things. And then the intuition for me comes in, that once we've started to do that work, it's like the center stage is more the intuition speaking and that creativity able to speak, rather than that kind of dialogue of negative self-talk.
Yeah. That's really fascinating, actually, because as you say, if you can really lock into your intuition whilst you're performing on stage, then there is no room really for worrying about what's going on in front of you or what people's opinions are, or your sabotaging beliefs, or that feeling of being an imposter or not being confident enough to do it. So I think it's really fascinating to find ways. Do you have any tools to connect to that part of you?
Yes, absolutely. And I was thinking about this in terms of, like, first of all, I really think the negative self-talk is super important. So, say you've got a really complicated choreography, it's quite hard to manage that inside your mind at the same time as going like, oh, but you're not good enough and you're not, all of those other words. So I think that's a huge part for me is working on that. I did a wonderful retreat a few years back with Muji, and it still will just be with me forever. It was 10 days of silence. And I think silence is connected to voice as well. I think there's this, like, we need those times of rest and resting your voice and, having that space, because then you can kind of really manifest and connect to your voice in a much more powerful way. But so meditation for me, 100%, I meditate every single morning. This is why I love yoga. And I think, again, like, for me, voice and body are connected. And I would love to hear your opinions on this, but I feel like when I'm more flexible, when I, like, if I, how they say that the jaw and the pelvis are connected. So you need to kind of have this like supple jaw and you need to have this supple pelvis for the two to work together. I just think this is all fascinating. And like, in terms of my movement classes, we will often use voice, or I will invite people. Many people are really shy, they're like, I don't do voice at the same time as moving, but to just try and get people in touch with that kind of idea of vibration, and that idea of kind of vibrating your voice as well as vibrating your body, I think is really fascinating. And then, as you know, Julie, like, my coaching is, we dive into, so one lovely process is to understand what are your choices, to make your choices and to kind of dedicate yourself to them every day, but then to look at like, what is your fears? Where is that holding you back? Where are your beliefs getting in the way? And I recently have been reading Existential Kink, which is a book by Carolyn Elliott. And there's a section in that called the Fear Inventory. And I just think it's so important that we understand what are our fears so that we can move them out of the way, and not so that we give them loads and loads of focus so we can refocus on what we would love. But for me, that's really important. And as you know, in the work I practice, I work with the bridge of like, this is all the stuff. This is all the murky thing. This is what I would love. So then what is that bridge? What's that obvious step, that one step even that you can take towards doing what you would love, and just going for that every single day and leaning into it every single day.
Just hearing that just makes me feel really excited and empowered to go and do what I want to do. Yes.
It's so exciting, isn't it? I agree.
Yes. But I think there's a really good connection there, because we do sometimes forget as singers that moving our body before we sing is really important, and I find that yoga is a really good practice to do on a regular basis. And if I don't do it on a regular basis, I really notice it. I hold tension everywhere, and it might be from stresses and strains and worries, but it might also just be bad posture. And all of these things, they do stop the body and the muscles from being as flexible as they can, and those muscles that we need for singing. So we know we don't all just sing from our throat. We have a lot of other muscles in our body that are actually supporting our voice. And if they're not warmed up, and I think we forget that. We think, oh, it'll be all right. I'll make it. Oh gosh, I've got a recording session, and it's like, I don't know, it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and I've just got up, and I haven't got time to warm up, but it'll be fine. I'll do it. And it's not okay, because it might happen. It might be that you can get to that session once, but if you're trying to maintain that regularly, then it just exacerbates, and that pressure or that tension just remains and doesn't get released, and then it just builds and builds, and they're the kind of practices and routines we don't want to be getting into. We want to be getting into the more freeing and liberating practices that allow us to speak. And as you say, it's definitely important to connect that mind and body together. So not just for yoga for the physical side, but as you say, for that time out, those 20 minutes, even if it's 20 minutes of just sitting there and just focusing on the breath, or focusing on the movement, and not everything else that's going on in the head.
And one more technique, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
One more technique that I love, I think might be really helpful, is TRE, which is tension release exercise.
Yeah.
Do you know it? Are you familiar with it?
Explain more.
It's basically, you can see it in animals. Like when animals get traumatized, they shake. And the theory is that actually we as humans are meant to shake, that it's a way that you kind of like, through the tremors, you release the trauma in your body. And I used it when I was making a piece called Ladylike, and it was quite a traumatic, we were looking at the Me Too movement, and we were kind of really releasing a lot of all of our stuff in that piece. And so we started to use it after every session. And it's just transformed my life, because it is essentially like this way of releasing the tension. And, sometimes it might allow me to also release tears, or like release anger, and I think it's such an important part of us as human beings, but also us as creative beings, that we also have to do that work to release the tension. And kind of, it very much connects back to what you were saying about yoga, that for me, it's another way of releasing that kind of, that excess stuff in the body, but in a quite physical way. So I think it works really well for people who like to move, because it's, you don't have to necessarily kind of do the coaching, but you're getting out the stuff in another way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that through shaking and
that's right. So there's like 8 exercises that you do, and it's basically kind of triggering the psoas muscle to go into these tremors. But it is amazing. Like I love how much I feel the difference, even in my yoga when I do that. It's like everything is released up in a different way.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
There was this really brilliant piece of, it was a book as well, but a piece of research by the Nagoski sisters, book on burnout.
Ooh.
And they they were talking about the stress cycle, you know, and how to break the cycle. And, you know, one of the things they said was just what you said, that like the animal kingdom, you know, you see the whoever, you know, the zebra that's escaped, you know, and it doesn't sort of sit for weeks going, oof, that was quite scary. It just goes, you know, and kind of,
right.
you know.
It's amazing, isn't it? Gets up and goes.
And we don't consider that in our daily life. And that you know, there are techniques as well that, you know, meditative practices where they think things like autogenic training, where they think that to find the rest and repair, sometimes you have to, you know, explore the fight or flight. If there's tension in the body, move, make noise, you know, just shake it off, essentially.
Yeah.
Whereas, and I suppose it's just different philosophies, but some, you know, things like mindfulness practices might spend more time just sitting with the emotion, or, you know, and observing it. But I love what you said about that point, because it seems to be that it's a kind of forgotten part of being, you know, being human, that when things build up, we are allowed to, you know, have a shake and make a noise.
Shake it out. Yeah. It has made me think of that song, that Shake It Out song.
Yeah. Shake it out.
Yeah, that
one. Good old Taylor. It actually reminded me of the work of Dan Brulé. Do you know his work?
No.
He does a lot of breathing techniques, and he's applying a similar theory to sighing. So there's been, I think there's been a lot of research on this anyway, but he says that we don't allow ourselves to sigh as well as we don't allow ourselves to yawn. Yeah.
Let's just do a few of those. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And just doing that, you just automatically feel 10 times better. And apparently we do actually, everybody, just stop what you're doing and take a sigh. Absolutely.
It's a funny thing in society, isn't it? Because if you did that in company, you know, if you were just sitting there and you went, then someone would say, oh my goodness, what's wrong? Or why are you in a bad mood? Or what? You know, people get quite sort of surprised by noise.
Or with yawning, how rude, you know. And actually, am I right that yawning helps you to wake up?
Yeah, it has major benefits actually neurologically. So we actually should yawn, and we should really enjoy yawning. From what I've been reading, and again, this breath expert, Dan Brulé, who's the breath expert for the personal development coach, Tony Robbins.
Oh yeah,
so
I love a bit of Tony Robbins.
Yeah, he's great. And he's breath coach. But
awesome.
But he's talking about this, and that we should be yawning more frequently. And also, the sighs. We actually do sigh quite a few times an hour, but we just don't notice.
Wow.
So, but we try to, as we were talking about, we try to hide it, you know, and we should actually allow it to be, and really maybe even expand on it. So,
wow.
That's my new goal for a daily routine, is to just sigh with people and see what happens.
Love it.
The Connected Signal.
If you would like to dig deeper into any of the themes or techniques we have touched upon with Ella in this episode, please check the notes attached. There you'll find links to the various techniques, the books discussed, the artists Ella mentioned, and much, much more. You can also join our Facebook group, where you'll find further info. But first, there is much more to explore with Ella, so let's dive straight back into our chat and start with how movement can unlock creativity. Enjoy.
The Connected Signal.
Just following on from that, because I know that one of the courses that you do, you know, is a movement, meditation and mudra class. And that, you know, part of that is just what we were talking about, you know, the stress cycle and releasing it. But you also talk about how it can unlock creativity. And I'm really fascinated by that. What are your experiences of how, particular movements or, mudras have unlocked these things for you?
Yeah, I mean, I love Moodras. And actually, I met an amazing woman in Leeds. She's in, if you're ever in Leeds, anyone, there's a kind of community centre in Meanwood. And she's there and she's in her 70s or maybe a little bit older. And she's like, you have cancer, you do this, you have this, you do this. It's just incredible. And she kind of really prompted me to start to research Moodras. And yeah, I use Moodras in my meditations every single morning. So I balance my chakras with Moodras and so on. But what I really find is like my meditations, and I think maybe this does depend on like what your skill is. I'm choreographing, but it's not like I'm working. It's like, it's like happening inside my head. And I will often, I'll be there and I'm like, oh, wow, that was beautiful. And then I'll try the thing. And it's just like the most exciting thing to allow that intuition to come through you. Like it's like you're channeling rather than it kind of being in that thinking brain. It's just about like getting out of the way and listening. So with the meditation mudra mantra session, which actually I've renamed now as embodied alchemy, because I really feel like that's what it really is. It's this kind of, it's bringing together the alchemy coaching that I do and then the movement in kind of one space. But yeah, what I've realized is that actually that is how we get creative. It's getting out of the way of ourselves. And dance classes and that kind of overthinking mind that can often be busy judging and kind of doing the comparing to the next person or all of that negative self-talk. And that's why I came up with that as a concept of actually we can do the work and we can, because the goddess path, that's my coaching program. We work through each chakra. So because there's so much in each chakra, like it's not for me just about, the beautiful things of it's the color red or it's this, but it's also about the kind of what happens when we're imbalanced. And so that's where I'm really fascinated in working is like, for example, in the root, it's about survival, it's about fear. And so can we help people to lean into those things? And with the embodied alchemy kind of course, it was about, well, what tools can we use without kind of bringing in that overthinking mind, so that you might have an improvisation exercise that allows you to release and allows you to learn about yourself, but it's also just, kind of like letting you get out of the way of yourself. Because it fascinates me how we talk about glass ceilings and all these things, but very often the biggest glass ceiling is our own beliefs and our own stories. And that's what really is holding us back, is when we don't give ourselves permission.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fascinating. I find it fascinating. The more that you delve into it, the more you can start to relate to it and you start to, but it does give you just gives you more confidence when you know more about yourself and where it's coming from, and that you can actually choose something different. And it is within your power to choose something different for you and your life, rather than, as you say, waiting on those external validations, actually. And actually, yeah, ignoring those and just thinking, well, is this really true for me? If it's true for me, okay, how do I go again about overcoming this or finding something that, fulfills me and gives me that empowerment rather than.
And I think early on in our career, very often, you might get feedback of you don't have enough experience, and that often makes people go, oh, well, that means I'm not good enough. Actually, if you listen to the word, you don't have enough experience. So then how can you create the opportunities to have the experience? And maybe that's that you do it yourself or you make something, or, and you just listen to your intuition. And then it's actually from that, you've filled in a skill that maybe was missing. And then you go again for whatever audition it is. And,
absolutely. Yeah. So, your performances, actually, just thinking about feedback, your performances have invited the audience to have a shared experience. What have been your most memorable pieces of feedback from the audiences?
Oh, pieces of feedback. I think probably I'm going to go with one for Ladylike, which was it was a man called Chris Megginson. He's wonderful from Leeds, actually, from Yorkshire. He used to work at Yorkshire Dance. And he said, this should be compulsory watching for everyone, but especially men. Just like, that's so brilliant.
Yes.
that really was just like, wow, that's really powerful. Thanks, Chris. Big shout out to Chris. But, we did... It's been a really amazing summer. We did a project this summer with Little Amal. So there's this wonderful, many people will know this wonderful puppet who's walking from Syria all the way to England. We'll end up in Manchester in November 2021. And we got to choreograph for the Manchester International Festival this kind of connection in for when Little Amal arrived in Turkey. And that was just like an incredibly moving experience, but having, audience members going, I cried and then I laughed and then I experienced joy. And that was just really like, it was a very emotional piece. And actually I was sitting kind of 3 rows back from the woman who'd written some of the music and had this wonderful story of her own journey from Afghanistan to the UK. And it was just, it was just like this heart-wrenching, beautiful, joyous celebration and healing experience. And every single dancer as well that I worked with, it was just like, one of the dancers said, I think that's the best job I've ever done in my life. And that was just because I had bad experiences as a company member where the choreographer really didn't care about the dancer. And so that was for me probably the most important bit of feedback of like, I'm also just, to be able to look after the dancers as well, for them to have that great experience.
I think that's very, must be, we're talking about not requiring or not seeking validation, but there's something, I think, in terms of at a time when creative work feels like it isn't valued at least by the powers that be, but at the same time people really need it, and audiences and performers, and to have a situation where the people creating the work and making the art feel so, feel such joy to be part of it. That must be such a special experience, because I think sometimes, as performers, you sort of think, well, why am I doing this sometimes? What am I doing? Does anybody care?
Yeah, it's true. So it is really lovely, isn't it, to have that reaffirmation and that kind of like, this is why I'm doing it. Yeah. And it's so important. I think it's a healing ritual. Performance is much more than just a performance.
Yeah, we sometimes forget that, I think. I think, it is. It's a place for us to connect with people, but it's also a place for us to express ourselves, as we talked about before, and that's so important, because we sometimes get caught up in the ebbs and flows of life, and forget what it is we really want to do and how we want to express. It's like, I should do this, I should do that, I've got to do that, I've got to do that for this reason, and rather than stepping back sometimes and going, well, actually, what am I doing it for? Am I doing it from the love? Is this really what I want to do, or am I doing it for other reasons, or that perhaps don't really suit who I am? But what we'd also really like to know is, which I think is quite an apt topic at the moment, your I Am All Women lockdown project. Do you have any ideas for future projects? And how do you feel that we can tackle this ongoing subject of women's safety? Do you have any views or perspectives on this?
Yeah.
And how can we use creative arts to tackle this ongoing issue, perhaps in society?
It's so upsetting, isn't it? With the kind of the things that have just come out in the news this week.
Yeah.
It's just so important and so upsetting. And I actually think now it's kind of like, I feel like what needs to happen is it needs to flip to the men, in terms of like, well, why did that man think that was okay? What happened for him to just forget about the humanity of, for example, Sabina, or for example, Sarah, Everard, of like, where is that loss of that human being that forgetting that human. And so I'm quite interested in that now as a concept of like, what can we do to have those conversations with the men? Is that my place? I'm not sure. But I think it's a lot about our society as well, that we live in this very patriarchal society where, for me, it's about getting back to what I call the divine feminine. And I'm really interested in the heroine's journey of like this kind of like remembering who we are and remembering what we're really about and remembering what our services are to the world. So, yeah, so I guess, can art do these things? Yes, I really believe it can. And I really believe it can challenge. And I believe it's a really important and safe. I actually don't use the word safe. I tend to call them brave spaces, because I think you can never really guarantee that anywhere is safe, but you can create a space that feels brave for people to kind of do that work and to do that reflection. But yeah, I think my kind of skills lie in working with women and working with the queer community. Actually, I think those are kind of the two areas that I'm more interested in, creating healing and creating ritual. But I really hope that we can continue the work. And like my next piece, I'm actually working on a duet with a man. And it's been quite interesting because I've done a lot of work with women. Although my kind of piece before lockdown, so the I'm a Woman project happened during lockdown, but just before that, I was originally actually going to be touring a piece called Foreign Bodies, an underwater love story. And that was with a kind of a crew of the artists. So obviously lockdown, it was like, right, change tack. And what can we do in these times? And so I'm a Woman just worked so well because, it was about like, be wherever you are, do you, and, tell this story in this kind of short space of time. So it really worked as a lockdown project. And it was interesting because I'd had the idea maybe 3 years before, but just didn't know quite how to work with 33 women and get them to do this thing. But then in lockdown, we needed a project like that. But what we have talked about is, could we do a global one, or could we do like one specifically in Brazil, for example? How could we continue to grow that, and how could we make that into a message which is kind of speaking more to gender violence and, this unlearning that I believe needs to happen, on a global scale and across genders.
Yeah. Wow.
I think it's really exciting to see what happens, with the expanding this idea, because I suppose the other thing as well is that in our maybe sometimes limited or kind of filtered views, living where we live and doing what we do, that there are so many dialogues and conversations where new knowledge can be created. I remember the philosopher Theodore Zeldin used to say that the biggest adventure of our time is not who am I, it's who are you. I often that's the kind of thought that will wake me up in the middle of the night, saying maybe there's something I don't understand about the world that someone in Brazil somewhere has the answer to, and I'm not, I don't get to speak to them. How will I ever know? And so projects like this, where just those voices are part of the exchange, it shows the value of creative arts, because there are few channels for that to happen in our society.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I'd love to make that happen.
Yeah. Wow. Yes, sorry, I was lost in thought then. And Ella's just been given a hot chocolate, is that? Or no, a tea?
Coffee.
A coffee.
Woo-hoo, my first coffee of the day.
Oh, well, the speed of conversation might go 10 times faster. Sorry, Michael, were you going to ask something? I've forgotten what I was going to say.
I was just thinking, I guess, to finish up, although, please, we're happy to go wherever you want to go with the conversation. But I was just thinking, having this multifaceted path, I sort of didn't even want to use the word career, because that feels slightly like a box, but all these different things that you explore in your work. What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about that? And then I guess what's next for you?
Sure. So that's really interesting, because I was told a lot. So like I went into dance quite late. I was doing Brazilian dance, but it was quite interesting to be kind of like it was very like perceived as the community thing rather than it being like high level or highly skilled. And I decided to go to a conservatoire to train in dance quite late. And they were like, well, you need to decide. You can't, because I have a background in breaking as well. And that was this wonderful, I just feel like we have many alter egos, you know, and it was like, yes, I can be a samba dancer. Yes, I can be a salsa dancer. But there was a part of me that just loved putting on my baggiest clothes and like, you know, going and representing in that whole way. And so people were always saying, you need to choose and you can't do so many things. And, you know, I told you about my really early experience in Brazil with circus. So I was a circus artist as a hobby, or I did silks. I chose just at least one style.
So
Only one style. Oh God, it's amazing. So actually that's in the piece that I'm working on now is a dance piece, but essentially we dance on the silks. But I would say like, do you? And like that, I really remember one producer, she said to me, you can't have it all, Ella. And that just like resonated through my head for so long. Do you know what? You can.
Yeah.
You can do what is right for you. And like, you know, here I am living my best life. And I'm so glad that I didn't take that advice to heart, because all of those different things that I learned make me an artist. And you know, I try and define myself as an artist now, because there are elements of me, like my downtime, I paint. I told you I love to sing and I have a weekly singing lesson. Like for me, all of those parts are part of who I am. And this is how I am more creative. And this is how I kind of channel those ideas. So my advice would be, do you, and you can do whatever you want to do, you can do it. And if someone tells you can't, then find your own way to make that happen. You don't have to we don't have to allow external voices to stop us from doing what we would love. Yeah. And then what I'm working on is I'm making this piece I'm making two versions. So there's the rainbow butterfly and papillon. One is for grown-ups and one is for children. And it's really exploring identity and imposter syndrome and Oya, as I mentioned earlier. And then after that, I'm going to work with a wonderful artist called Akim Toussaint from Leeds. And we are exploring the concept of salsa as a martial art. I'm so excited.
That sounds awesome.
So excited. And it's kind of like, you know, playing with all our skills, so contemporary and so on. But
wow.
Who knows? Maybe that will be that exploration of kind of the masculine and those questions that we were asking. But yes, I'm really excited about that piece. And then, you know, still like writing and working on, so the Papillon piece, we're taking it online. So we have this wonderful platform where I've got an artist kind of illustrating it all. And yeah, just continuing to expand and kind of channel into all these different possibilities. And I'm loving painting at the moment as well. So yeah.
I absolutely love that. I mean, I love, your new projects sound awesome. I'm really excited to see how they develop. Salsa as a martial art. I mean, that is just, that's going to be great.
Right.
What a new concept. But I just love the fact that you say, do you? Because I think, and I know that from being a singer and also being a singing artist, I love the sort of umbrella term of being an artist, because it has so many different facets. There's so many things that can incorporate. And, you know, I always felt that I wasn't a good painter, so I just didn't do it. It's like, oh, I sing, I perform, but I can't paint, you know, which is probably rubbish, really. I should probably just sit down and try it. If it's fun, then go for it. You know, it's also to do with the imagination. But I think that as singers, and I see it a lot through the singers that I coach, it's almost like I'm going to be a singer, so I have an identity as a singer, and that's all I am. And not to say that you can't have a fruitful career as a singer, and you don't have to do lots of other things, but it can be quite limiting, because then all the focus becomes on that. And you then, if you're open to other creative aspects, you're going to bring that into your work. However you develop as a singer, whether it be an artist that writes their own songs, whether it be a function singer that performs and you're an entertainer, maybe it incorporates some dance, maybe it incorporates some show aspects into it. You know, it might be
it's a costume. I think that's art, isn't it?
Yes,
it's like
absolutely.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of singers forget that. There's lots of focus on vocal techniques, extremely important. So it's on the voice, but it's like that, as you said, it also encompasses who you are, you know, what you would like to say and how you would like to use your voice. And that's in so many different art forms, doesn't it? So I just love that. And not to be afraid of being interested in other things, because you think, oh God, I can't, that has to be a hobby. Well, it might be a hobby, but you can explore it and divide your time up equally. You don't just have to do the singing.
Absolutely.
thing.
And I would love to add one more thing, which connects back to what I was saying earlier about the goddess voice, is to remember that you're whole. And I think that can be in any situation. Like I went out for a night out in Leeds actually last month or the month before. And there was this moment when everyone was like, why aren't you drinking as much as us? And, you know, like just that kind of like real like peer pressure. And I was like, hang on a minute, I'm a whole human and I don't want to drink, so I'm not going to drink. And it was just, you know, like that, oh yeah, I'm practicing the stuff that I do all the time in this other place. And I think that's really important, is just check or notice when you're kind of out of balance and you're apologizing for being yourself.
Yeah.
Remember you're whole.
That's a really good message. And I think it's a really good message to end on, actually, isn't it? I could actually carry on the conversation for another hour, but perhaps we should save it for another podcast. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Michael nearly said Charlie.
That is imposter syndrome on my no, I just think it's so inspiring, because I think a lot of singers, you know, we look for the answers to things, possibly in our own bubbles sometimes. And you know, this whole conversation, it reminds us, if everyone is an artist, then everyone can have a conversation and learn from each other. You know, and it makes me think, apart from the sort of street dance classes I did about 20 years ago that I wasn't very good at. Now I'm thinking, this is something that, going back to being a learner of something new, I should explore, because it is expressing yourself. You know, in daily life, we are, you know, a certain percentage of our communication is voice. The other huge part of it is body language. So the more that we explore that, the better. I'm thinking now, I've sort of left a big part of that to one side, and it's something I should maybe get back into. Apart from the once a year Cayley dancing at New Year in Scotland, which I always did enjoy. That's good.
I love a Cayley, and that's making me think about this. You know, this goddess voice of the same in terms of how do you hold yourself whole in your body language? So I think it is all a part. It's like one big puzzle, isn't it? And it's like putting all the pieces together so that we are whole. But you're never broken, even if you haven't got all those pieces of the puzzle. So just a reminder of that too.
So it's really inspiring me to remember that there are, and for other listeners actually, to remember that, you know, if there's something that you're genuinely interested in pursuing, you can pursue it. It's really okay for you to do that. Just because you've chosen to take one path doesn't mean that has to be the only path that you choose, even in that moment. And as you say, you don't have to, you know, people will say, oh, you can't do everything all at once. And yes, there's got to be a certain amount of focus. But if you've got that on your, as we all say quite often, our bucket list these days, you know, sets of choices, let's say, you know, it can still be a choice that you can work towards in your daily life. You don't have to put it aside for another day or another decade, or you can say, no, that's something that I want to incorporate either now, or I will start working towards that. Maybe I take a step towards that whilst I'm doing this other creation at the moment, so that it's still, the seed's been planted and it's still growing, even if it's growing slightly slower than the other thing that you're focusing on. And I think, then you, as you say, you feel more whole then, don't you? Because you're actually, you're allowing all of those other parts of you to live. Fascinating. Wow. Ella, it's been so great to talk to you. Really, really enjoyed it.
It's such a joy.
Yeah, really a joy. We'd love to have you on again in the future. And hear about all your new projects and what you've been doing and what you've learned from those.
And I've also learned, I'm going to be looking up, is it the Nagoski sisters?
Yes.
On Burnout. I'm excited to, and Damboulet, all sorts of things I've learned today as well. So thank you for the learning and the joyful conversation.
Yes, thank you too.
Oh, thank you.
The Connected Signal.
Thanks to all of you out there for listening to our podcast today. All information relating to our podcast and guests can be found on our Facebook page, The Connected Singer. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter. If you have enjoyed this episode's podcast, we would really appreciate your support by subscribing and helping us to continue in creating a connected community of listeners and specialists connected to the field of singing and beyond. Take care of yourselves and each other, and see you next time.